gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. We'll get to that. I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to all of you, to our congregation's council, to our congregation's staff, to you, the members of the congregation, for the grace and patience you have shown to me and to my household over these first 5 months of our ministry together as pastor and congregation. It has been challenging in so very many ways, challenging in part because we're trying to build the airplane as we're flying it. We're trying to revitalize the life and ministry of the congregation, even though we're not out of the pandemic just yet. It's been challenging for my household personally because our household has not had a house. You all have been so good about checking in with us Hirsches about our living situation. You know that we have been bunking with my folks who have a place over in the East Valley for the last 5 months. That has been such a blessing because we've still been paying an East Coast mortgage on a West Coast salary this whole time while we've been waiting for the house to finally close. So the fact that we've been able to live with my folks rent-free is demoralizing when you're a 45-year-old living with your parents, but it has saved us some money and has felt like a responsible thing to do. We got an offer on our house in November, but when that offer was made, our buyers needed a long period for closing, but we were at the point where we sort of figured we better just take it, keep this process going. So we got to the close date, not quite, we got to a few weeks before the close date, and our buyers let us know that their lender was requesting to see some updated financial information, and so their lender is requesting that closing be extended from January 27th to February 28th. What? Thank you. Yeah, that's kind of how we felt. And this whole time, as we've been trying to get things tied up back east, we have been spending almost every spare moment of our busy lives looking for a house. And as we were imagining coming home to the desert, home to family, home to peace, we imagined to ourselves that it would be fairly easy to find the kind of house we were looking for. We thought it wouldn't be all that challenging somewhere in the West Valley to find a 4-bedroom home that has a loft or some other bonus space, preferably a 3-car garage, and, depending on the price point, a pool in a yard that is a little bit bigger than a postage stamp. And ideally at a price point that we can actually afford. Apparently, that is way more difficult than we imagined then, and we've been coming to find it. And as we have been constantly searching for a house for our household, our language about this process has started to shift. Originally, it was, we're going to get to find a house. And then it became, well, the right house is going to come up. And that became, are we ever going to find a place? And that has become, if only we could find a house, everything in our life would finally click together and we would be saved from this grave mental distress of feeling so dislocated, so rootless. It's in this moment, with that kind of self-talk, that language of if only, that the Spirit of Jesus came along and sprinkled some cool baptismal water in my face with this morning's gospel reading. We're very familiar with the Sermon on the Mount and Jesus' Beatitudes from the Sermon on the Mount. Those beautiful declarations of God's broken heart for the last, the least, the little, the lost, and the lonely. God's declaration of solidarity with those who join God in caring for the last, the lost, the least, the little, and the lonely, and who dare to tell the world about God's broken heart. We're familiar with the Beatitudes, the blessings from the Sermon on the Mount. But today, we don't have the Sermon on the Mount. We have Jesus' Sermon on the Plain. And just as Jesus comes down the mountain onto the plain, with his blessings, Jesus gets into the nitty-gritty of life. In this version of his proclamation, he refuses to allow us to just spiritualize those truths from the Beatitudes. It's not blessed are the poor in spirit on the Sermon on the Mount, on the Sermon on the Plain. It's blessed are the poor. Blessed are the hungry, not just those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, but those whose tummies are growling because they do not have enough. Blessed are they, Jesus declares in his Sermon on the Plain. And instead of declaring God's blessing on those who share God's broken heart for the last, the least, the lost, the little, and the lonely, as Jesus does in his Sermon on the Mount, in the Sermon on the Plain, Jesus instead declares these woes, warnings. And there's a way to hear these warnings as condemnation. Woe to you who are rich. Woe to you who are comfortable. Woe to you who are full. Woe to you who laugh. Because, and the implication might be, you might think to yourself, that at some point in some future, God is going to judge us for our prosperity. That's one way to hear this, and I am not in charge of this operation. If you need to hear a challenge from the Lord about the way you relate to money and the things it can bring to you, then you should hear that challenge, because maybe there is a course correction to which God is inviting you. But I don't think that listening to these woes is just about a warning of judgment. I think it also can be a warning of disappointment. A warning that all of those things for which we strive, all of those things which we accumulate and add to our CV, all of those things at some point are going to disappoint us. We might get that 4-bedroom house with a loft and a pool and a 3-car garage, but that does not mean, like my insides desperately hope, that suddenly everything in life will click and be easy. Might be easier, but life is never easy. Sure enough, I'll come to you on the other side of that contract and tell you, guess what? I had to put $2,000 into the pool last week, and I don't know where that money's going to come from. Or you may say to yourself, if only I had that job. You better believe that at some point, that job is going to break your heart. That job is going to exhaust you and earn you your first heart attack. If only I had this kind of relationship, you better believe at some point that relationship is going to be something that requires work. It just won't be natural and easy. If only I had just this amount of money, or if only my knees didn't hurt the way they do. Or if only, do you hear the language? If only, if only, if only. And this morning, The Spirit of Jesus reminds us that when we find ourselves in a place where we are saying, if only, we have put our trust in the wrong thing, the wrong situation, or the wrong person. Eventually, all those things and situations and persons will disappoint us. There's nothing in this world that can buoy our soul when the hard times come other than the Lord. The prophet Jeremiah says, "Blessed are those whose trust is in the Lord. Blessed are those whose trust is the Lord." The house is not going to make everything click for the Hirsches. The Lord is our consolation. That restoration to health, though I pray for it for you, is not going to make everything click. The Lord is going to make everything click. Hitting that certain threshold of enoughness where you have the car you want, you have the house you want, you have the job you want, you have the spouse you want, you got the kids you want, you got whatever it is that you determine as your threshold for enoughness. Eventually those things will disappoint you. Trust me on this. I used to be a pastor in Paradise Valley. I was surrounded by people who had the very finest of everything. Beautiful homes, beautiful cars, beautiful vacations, beautiful spouses. Everything looked so dang wonderful on the outside, and yet among so many, there was a deep, profound, troubling emptiness. And those houses, cars, jobs, influence, spouses, children, toys, trips, none of it could fill that emptiness. There is only one, not thing, one being who can be your source of consolation in the vagaries, the ups and downs, the joys and concerns, the failures and victories of this life. And that is the God who is revealed in Christ Jesus and present to you in the Spirit. So despair of anything else bringing you ultimate joy or peace. Despair of it all, even as you continue to enjoy it. Despair of it and put your trust in the one who ultimately will not fail you. His name is Jesus. Please rise.